And welcome back to Retrospect My Fantasy. Today we're going to be working on our game design for Al Qadim, our world guide. So before we get into that, got a couple things to go over. Number one is that we have a Discord. So if you take that link that I just put into chat, that'll hook you up into our Discord. I've got a whole bunch of voice comms channels for games, should anybody be interested in joining in on those. I've got a Q&A, suggestions, I've got various other chat channels. I've also got an announcement channel in case I need to announce something particularly important. Announcement number two, well, housekeeping number two for tonight is that we are partnered with Humble. So, I'm partnered with Humble because they do amazing work over there. You can pick up damn near any product you're looking for in terms of games. You can get comic books, e-comic books, e-books, magazines, web development tools, game design tools. Trying to think if I'm missing anything there. I don't think so. You can pick all that up at Humble Bundle, usually on sale, and not just on sale, but on sale off cycle from everywhere else that is having that has sales. So you'll find games that are on sale that you will find on sale somewhere else some other time, and usually the sales will be off season. Like, you'll get great sales right now. I guarantee you, right now, there's a great sale over at Humble Bundle. Go check them out. Because not only do you get all that awesome web tools and game design game design tools and instructions and whatever you are looking for, you help support fabulous charities. And by using our link, you also help support this channel. So please, if you're looking at picking anything up in the near future, give them a shot. Number three, there's four for today, just to let you know, is that we have a Patreon. The reason I started a Patreon is because I realized that not everyone has the time or even the inclination to dig through the bit mines to help support this channel monetarily if they wanted to. They don't have the means to support it through subscriptions. Or maybe means isn't the right word. Maybe they can't. Oh, I guess it is. Yeah, I think means is the word I'm looking for here. They don't have the means to subscribe at $5, $10, or $25. But through Patreon, that gives them the option to set the amount that they are willing to help support this channel with and have it be reoccurring. So it gives you that same reoccurring convenience that like a Twitch subscription does, but you get to set what level you want that to occur at. Now, this is most particularly important when talking about our game design segment, because upon the completion of each project that we do for game design, if you are a patron at the $20 level, you will get a copy of it. If it's a board game, I will have all the pieces made and sent and packaged together and sent out to you. If it's a book like this, I will print it up. I'll make sure it looks nice and that it's all well put together and designed, and ship it out to you. If we make a digital product like a video game, I will make sure you get a copy of it. That is what that tier on our Patreon is for, is so that people who are interested in picking up some of the things that we are making can help support this channel and get that. Some of these things that we make might go on to be on sale at some venues, but some of this might be the only way to get them. So if that's something you're interested in, please make sure that you hit that tier if you want to take part in that. And very last thing is that all the music that we are listening to today is provided by Free Music Archive. And what you're gonna see once we switch cameras over is that I have a Winamp screen open. I have it on shuffle, so it's in no particular order how it's going to be played. But you will be able to see the name of the artist and the name of the track to give proper accreditation. That way there's no copyright claims on our page here. So let us get into our game design. So where we left off is we were most of the way done, actually. We might be able to complete this portion of it tonight, but we were going through and we were setting up the cities in such a way that it's more easily referenceable when we get it into an actual printed format. So let us get on that. So I've been trying to think of other interesting stories that I can tell about my time role-playing, but you know, after what is this, after four of these things, I think I'm starting to run out of interesting stories in role-playing, at least in my own personal experiences. And I don't want to tell you other people's stories, because if I get on guests, which I'm going to be hopefully scheduling some guests on soon, I want them to be able to tell their own stories. So while I'm always open for questions of any variety, this is a stellar opportunity for you to ask me whatever question you want, especially if it's about role-playing systems or like characters that I've made or like GMing tips or anything like that. This is the perfect time to be asking those questions because I don't have anything better to talk about right now. I don't have any like amazing stories that are springing to mind that are, you know, perfect for this situation. And it might stir on some stories that I hadn't thought about. Because, I mean, you know how the brain works. You're talking about one thing, and next thing you know, 10 minutes later, you're looking back at the conversation thinking, how did we get here? So, please, the forum is open, and I am here to answer whatever questions about me or role-playing or gaming or whatever, to the best of my ability. It would be better if it is, or it would be easier for me if it's something that I don't have to look up what it is. Like if you're asking me about some new like neuroscience technique or anything like that, I'm very unlikely to know what that is because that is not in a field that I regularly check in on. This is just essentially a exposition dump on what the Pantheist region is. The Pantheist region is what we would consider kind of religious zealots, as I think the best word that comes to mind about what describes the Pantheist League. So, assholes. Because I don't care what religion you are, even if you're atheist or agnostic, if you are a zealot about it, you're an asshole. And as we enter our editing phase, which is the next step after all of this, and then so it goes, first it's put it into a readable format, which is primarily what we're doing now, and then it is editing, making sure that every word that we put into this world guide needs to be in there. If there is even a single word that we can remove and still have make sense, or still get the point across that we are trying to get across, the better. Because when I go to print this up, I don't need the world guide to be, 6,000 pages long or whatever it happens to be. Especially once we start adding in things like maps and other sorts of graphics. We don't need these books to be forever. And that's even actually why I split them up into three main books. We're going to have the World Guide, which is what we're working on now. Then we're going to have the Player's Guide. And then we're going to have an Adventurer's Guide. Or, not guide, an adventure. So we're going to have a total of 3 books for the 5th edition introduction to Al-Qadim. That's the plan. So we will see how far along we get on that before something happens. I'm sure something happens. Something always happens that screws up well-laid plans. So we will see how far along we can get. I hope to get it completed. I would really like to have this all done, if not for anyone else, at least for myself. That way, when I run my next Al-Qadim campaign, I can just hand out the world guide and tell people like, hey, all right, so this is the world. This is what you have to work with in terms of like backstory and character development and what the goings on around you. Now here's the player's guide. So make a character. Which actually not, I was going to say a significant amount, but it's not going to be significant. But some of the stuff that is in the world guide will make it into the player's guide. But it's going to be just the briefest, barest rumblings of what's in the world guide. So when we talk about, like, Vahas, City of Searching, it'll be, located roughly 90 miles to the north of... That should be Rock of El Tiraf, at the mouth of the Al Naqwas. Vahas is the most somber city of the Pantheist League. People searching for enlightenment and truth, and perhaps for happiness, both would bring. Like, that, and then maybe a few other little tidbits about the city is all that's really going to make it into the player's guide version of Vahas, the City of Searching. The basic information doesn't need to have all this about the bureaucrats and the court and... Oh, I've been forgetting to do this. That's shame on me. See, this is one of those editing things that we're going to have to go back through and do, is taking all these sections like this and making sure that we make them stand out. And we'll probably take Names of characters. I don't know what we'll do. I think we'll probably italicize them. But I don't know yet. We'll see. And actually, this might not even be everything. The reason I still have this up is because, actually, I don't think I need anything in this book anymore. What's this? Okay, yep. I might include the coffee ceremony in its entirety in both sections, just because it's really neat. And it gives a lot of flavor to the world, and is an actual, like, Middle Eastern traditional ritual. That to a very very small amount, I participate in whenever I run an Aquadeum campaign. And by participate, what I mean is I make Turkish coffee for all my players. That's about the extent of participation that I have for that ceremony, because it's both simple in like what it takes to perform the ceremony, but it's involved enough that when you're trying to run a game, it can slow things down pretty significantly. I also tried to provide on the very first session. I tried to provide some food, but the only thing that I could really find, at least in my area, that would work was dates. Yep. The reason I thought of that is because up here, dates, apricots, and peaches. Or pears. I guess I could have gotten apricots. That would have been. I have a problem with this. This says that major productions for Fahas are fruit, livestock, trade, pottery, and China. Now, I know what they mean by China. You know what they mean by China. Everybody that reads that knows what they mean by China. Well, at least I would hope so. But that is not a word that they would use to describe high quality servingware. But I don't know how to. I personally don't know how else I would describe that. So that's going to be one of those things in editing that we're going to have to look up and figure out and see if there is a better term for that than China. I'm sure there is. I mean, they had to call it something before some of the best stuff came from China. Diningware? Fine diningware? I guess that kind of works. But I wonder if there's a single word that can be used to describe that. That's just a research thing. I'm sure I can find something. Pow. Hilm, 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 City of Kindness. Remove that. Nobody cares what his class levels and race are. They really, honestly, they don't matter. In most situations, whenever a DM is looking through these sorts of things and they come to like, oh, the ruler is Caliph Abir al-Faran, they're going to read through his little section, probably skipping over the fact that, what was it, he was a human... a human paladin. Human paladin mage, I think. Level 15 character. They're going to completely look past that and be like, they're just going to read his description and be like, okay, that's what this guy is. Cool. Now, if my players get into a fight with him, he's... because they're dumb. First of all, they're not going to fight him. They're going to fight his guards. He's a caliph, a mayor of a city. So of a pseudo mythological city. Or not pseudo, it is mythological, it doesn't exist. What's... oh man, words are escaping me today, which is not good for a reported wordsmith. God, he's a mayor of a pseudo Dark Ages. I don't know why that ancient city, and of course he's gonna have guards with him. Like, when have you ever seen an epic fantasy anything where a king or ruler of a city wasn't surrounded by guards? When? Simple answer, never. They're always surrounded by people. And of course they would be. They're important. And important people have bodyguards. Especially in epic fantasy. Those were the words I was thinking of, really. Epic fantasy. An epic fantasy series. Of course. Do you think the King of Rohan would not have his guards at hand? I mean, his guards were pretty much useless against Gandalf, but still, they were there. Also, they didn't protect against Wormtongue's semi-magical power given, taught to him by a wizard. I'm doing very well, Kasan. How are you doing? That should be a comma, not a period. Argle blargle blargle. It's cool. Good to hear it. Well, as I was saying a little while before you got here that I've pretty much run out of stories. So if anybody has any questions, I mean, I see that Kassan is here, and there's another person who has never deemed to chat, but if they have any questions, you guys feel free to ask them, especially if it's about role-playing or gaming or anything like that. But I'm up for answering damn near anything. I was just talking about how some of the things that are in here that we're cutting out for a good reason. And that's because most of the time, DMs don't use them. And players don't need to know the levels of the eldest daughter of the Caliph. That's just not something that the player characters need to know. There's a fly going around here somewhere. Not like a real fly, but like a gnat. And its very existence is vexing me. Wow, this section on features of the city is quite long. What city are we in? Hilm has a lot of stuff going on. Except the rumors are very small. So there's a lot of stuff going on the surface level, but not a whole lot going on maybe behind closed doors or in back alleys or anything like that. Pretty much everything in this city is up front. Including apparently public executions. Actually, that's pretty common. In epic fantasy or even medieval societies, public executions were a form of entertainment. So I don't know, but sometimes it's also not a very big 200 infantry, 1,000 cavalry, an additional 1,000 city guards, and 120 clerics, and 3 units of Mamluks. There's your actual, like, big military force for this city. Slave soldiers. Should probably embolden that as well. Also, in the very near future, I'm hoping to get some guests on for our Thursdays. I'm essentially going to be putting out a amongst my local friends here, just like a calling to see, hey, Train Boy, thank you very much for the host, sir. I greatly appreciate that. What was I saying? Oh, I'm going to be putting out essentially an open invitation to all of my close friends. I am doing great, sir. How are you doing? To see if any of them would like to come on and talk about their experiences in role playing, because I'm sure most of them have been role playing a lot longer than I have. And I'm sure they've got fun stories of their own, or insights, or... Actually, it's been my experience that everybody that role plays has one or two stories that are great, and then the rest of their stories are like, they'll tell them, especially if you ask, but those aren't the ones that they usually lead with. And as I roleplay more and more, I'm sure I'll get more stories, but for now, I've told you guys all of my good stuff. Most of which most of which are my characters dying, by the way. Those are most of my good stories. Oh yeah. Thank you, coffee. It's the juice of a cherry stone that keeps me alive. There's some weird breaks on... Oh. Accidentally deleted a letter. Good job, me. Let's see here, how long have we been going? We're going for about 35 minutes, so we're making pretty good time here today. I'm hoping that we can finish this initial pagination and first pass editing tonight. That way, next time, we can do our second editing pass and get it down and start getting it down to exactly what we want each section to say before we go into choosing like our layout and where we're going to place things, and like graphics and things like that. So actually, second phase editing is going to be a lot longer, and I'm probably going to do some of that off screen just because of how tedious it's going to be. But I'll also do some on screen. It'll probably just be more off screen than on. Because the second pass is going to be essentially going through this with a fine-tooth comb and figuring out exactly what we want it to say, make sure all of our punctuation is correct, make sure all of our spelling is correct, which is personally a struggle. Thank God for Windows and Google for figuring out that sometimes you don't even want to have to use this like an actual spell check. You just want to type and let the computer do its best to figure out what you're saying. And assuming that you're close enough, it usually can. At least in my experience. Oh, shoot. I clicked over and never clicked back. So we probably went like 4 or 5 songs without having that up for accreditation purposes. Major products. That's also one of those sections that players really don't need to give a crap about, but sometimes GMs just eat that crap up. Because what your GM's going to do is they're going to see, like, ooh, major products, general trade, sure, glass lenses and telescopes. Writing and books. Interesting. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have someone interrupt a shipment of lenses and telescopes because my players don't have one, in hopes that the players might rescue a large portion, or maybe even just stop the bandits and take one of these telescopes for themselves. Or will they be honorable? And will they give them all back? Or will they become the bandits themselves and take them and try to sell them on their own? That's the kind of stuff that GMs who are writing their own adventures in a world just eat up. And I've never used any of those types of hooks before, but I could very easily see myself doing that. That's actually one of those like early missions that you can give your players, that sort of thing, to determine what kind of game your players want to be in. Do your players want to be the heroes of the story and upstanding citizens? Or do they want to be like, do they want to do all their missions in the white, be upstanding, like moral individuals? Or do they want to be kind of gray and, you know, take advantage of some things where they can, but more or less be on the up and up? Or do they just want to be straight up ne'er-do-wells and like, yeah, sure, they'll stop the banditry from occurring in the future, and they will take everything that the bandits had, literally everything, and use it for themselves to sell or just have. It's a very interesting, it's a very good way of judging your players. Actually, that's something to keep in mind for when we do our adventure, because I want to do a starting adventure that's levels 1 to 3, that starts off as something simple, like trade being disrupted, and then grows into something a bit more serious, but not my typical, like, grows into the end of the world epic adventure that I usually do. Because I have a type. And when I write the adventure, I want to go against that type to see if I can grow in my writing style a little bit for Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, I guess my Alternity campaign wasn't like super epic until they made it that way. I just told them to figure out a way to make money for the crime syndicate. And they turned it into something freaking ridiculously awesome. And I will never fault them for that, because it was awesome, and I had a lot of fun trying to assault their base. that they had built up as a like crime hotel slash like secure hold location. I'm very fond of that campaign. I should actually, I'm very fond of that system. On top of Alquity, my favorite system is called Alternity, which is made by TSR, the company that originally made Dungeons and Dragons, before it was purchased by Wizards of the Coast. And Alternity is kind of the ultimate non-fantasy system. It allows you to do whatever you want from Middle Age from Stone Age into like hyperspace travel is common and not a big deal, and everybody has access to it, sort of thing. And it is a lot of fun. And it's also very different in terms of how the system actually works. Essentially, you have to roll in thresholds. Instead of trying to hit a single target number like in Dungeons & Dragons for anything, you're actually trying to hit like a small range, and that determines whether something is an amazing success, is it amazing, good, regular, fail? Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think it's an amazing success, a good success, a success, or a fail. And it's just a lot of fun. Especially if you take like weird skills like First Contact. Having skill in First Contact has never ever come up in any of the games that I've played in. But it's one of those skills where if you have the skill in First Contact and you come across a new alien species or a new tribe of an alien species that nobody's encountered before, you know you are the only person that knows how to interact with these individuals in such a way as to not screw everything up. Most people take combat skills, though, because it's a role-playing game system. Combat, although not necessary, is heavily implied. Oh, there's a lot of named characters here. That's a big city, 250,000 people. Dang. That might be more than the people that call the city that I live in home. I've never actually looked up what the native population of Eugene, Oregon is, but let's do so now. Let's see what kind of numbers I'm looking at here. Population for Eugene, Oregon. So Eugene, Oregon, according to the 2016 census, has 166,575 people. So this city has almost 100,000 people in it, more than the city that I currently live in. I'm willing to say that that makes it a pretty large city. The City of Confessions? Oh god, that sounds terrible. I didn't even read the moniker of the city until just now. So, you'll notice if you've been watching any of the previous episodes of game design that I had a bunch of music on here that was kind of like weird and just kind of like dissonant noise. Well, I took all those off. There was like 8 of them. And I replaced them with 4 different tracks that so far have been very good. And I'm hoping to add, I don't know, like 4 or 5 more by next week. So that we can have a very eclectic collection of music for this stream. $8,000 infantry. Holy crap, that's a lot. And 6 units of Mamluk. Whoa. Why is this city so well defended? I mean, I guess maybe that's something I need to look into. Maybe run a campaign in this city. Because clearly, stuff is happening near it. If it needs to be that well defended. Okay. Okay, interesting. It's right here in the rumors that war is on the horizon on this city. From various potential sources. And so having a large standing force on hand essentially means that if something were to occur, they are ready. But in general, it's just going to mean that the people who live in the city are going to be are going to feel more secure because they've never had a major conflict occur, and B, because they have a whole bunch of soldiers at the ready. So seeing all those soldiers doing their patrols or doing their drills outside the city walls or whatever is going to make the people feel a lot safer. And when people feel safe, they don't generally complain or start uprisings or anything like that. Savage tribes of the ruined kingdoms. That's funny because I've found in my readings of the ruined kingdom cities that they're actually quite nice. Well, I mean, that's of the cities. I haven't done too much reading on the surrounding areas. I'm sure there's stuff in the jungles all around the ruined kingdoms that are crazy. Oh yeah, and this C chapter 5 thing. Yeah, that we can get rid of that. The chapters of this world guide are going to be very different. With the glittering blades. She must be a Mamluk. Actually, I think I just thought of a story. So, I know I told the story, the basic story behind my Warhammer 40k character, Father Kane, the tech priest, and how he and a good friend of his, a psyker, have had many adventures where they almost died because early on the characters were incredibly inept and essentially turned into equipment, and were equipment because there were people that were far higher up at the ranks than them that technically owned them. They weren't like real people because they didn't have enough rank within general society, their own religious orders, or the military to actually like be anything. But eventually, of course, that changed. They became Father Kane and his good friend, the Psyker Uriah, became real boys. But they had a third friend, who was just a soldier. But as the characters went up in rank, they were forced to go to a party full of high-ranking inquisitorial agents and just kind of schmooze with, and other like lords of planets and things of that nature who thought they were all tough and had, you know, a lot of expensive gear and whatnot. And we're all kind of schmoozing in our own way. The Psyker Uriah was just kind of wandering around, creeping people out because he's this giant-headed weirdo with moving tattoos all over his body. Not because they're like some future awesome power tattoo or anything like that. No, because he has the ability to control his entire body and everything that it looks like and how it moves and grows and heals and things like that. So he would just do stuff to creep people out sometimes, like having his tattoos move around his body to show particular passages of the Imperial Catechism. Father Kane is essentially standing off to the side like a statue. And the normal soldier guy, Kaltos. Trying to remember what his first name was, because it was Father Kane, Psyker Uriah, and eventually Commissar Kaltos. Anyway, he's the one. He's actually like schmoozing because he's not made of metal and not a creepy guy that no one wants to hang around in case his brain turns into a portal for demons. So there's this just jerk of a royal who is clearly looking to prove something. And, Uriah's doing his thing, and generally people, because everyone's high enough rank here, are like he's trying to creep him out, but by doing things, but clearly like he's supposed to be here, and like people at that higher rank are used to weird shit, so they don't give it more than maybe a second, maybe a third thought, but they're not like really creeped out by it. Father Kane is being very aloof. I mean, the man is not like at that point was like 50% metal, like 7 feet tall and weighed like a ton and a half, and most of his body was guns, mechanical arms. Most of his visible appearance was mechanical arms that ended in guns. Um, and there's this noble. He's clearly got something to prove. He's going around, like, almost actively pissing people off, and then trying to get into duels with people. So the first person he finds is Hey, Wicked, how you doing, buddy? The first person he finds is the creepy psychic guy with a giant head and moving tattoos, and takes offense to his even being here. How dare a psyker be at this royal gala where only people of true nobility are supposed to belong. So he challenges him to a duel, and Uriah agrees, knowing that this guy can't actually hurt him, because nothing can. Not really. Not at this point. And then he runs into our commissar buddy, who's actually like schmoozing. He's hitting on women. He's like talking to other like older, like retired soldiers who are now lords. Like he's actually schmoozing and doing a good job of it. And this guy like interrupts his someone's story, and and Commissar Kaltos is like, "Hey man, no. It's not your place to talk. You need to let him finish." And the guy is, upset that he besmirches his honor and challenges him to a duel. And I don't remember why he was upset with Father Kane, but I remember Father Kane I think what it was is Father Kane is just so big and bulky that and moves slowly, that when he moves through a room, like people have to give him a large amount of space. And I think I bumped into him or something like that. And of course he took immediate offense to having a commoner touch him. So he challenged me to a duel. My duel was the last one that was going to take place. And they were going to go... it was going to be the commissar, and then the psyker, and then me. So he goes to fight the commissar, and it's going to be a fist fight. And everybody's down, or not a fist fight. I think it's going to be... I think it's going to be a melee fight, because they both have swords on their hips, because of course they do. It's 40k, and everyone carries a melee weapon around with them everywhere they go. So, the commissar goes in, and he tries to sneak a gun in just in case this guy tries to pull something. Except Father Kane at this point can manipulate anything metal with more or less his mind and magnets, and he just pulls the gun from the guy's holster, and is like, nope, no cheating, you're going in for this one for real. And it they have their fight, and it's pretty good. but it's not like spectacular or anything like that, except the guy gets disarmed, and instead of killing him because he's a noble, the commissar is like, okay, do you yield? The guy yields. So after like an hour or so, it's supposed to be the fight with the Psyker. And I walk up to my Psyker friend and I go, just don't murder him, because I have a fight with him later. And he's like, okay. Goes in there. They're also going to have a melee fight. No psychic powers. Which, only one of them had psychic powers anyway, but, you know. So, Uriah agrees to no psychic powers. Except, he has this special melee weapon it's a staff that's also a focus for his psychic powers. And whenever he hits somebody with that, he's able to do... It does, like, 1d6 damage. Plus an additional d6 for however powerful of a Psyker you are. And at that point... No, additional 2d6? 2d6 for every level of Psyker you are at that point. And at that point, he's like a level 5 Psyker. So that's an additional 10d6 damage. He strikes this guy once, or he rolls initiative, he rolls it clean, gets first hit, hits the guy. The guy then explodes into meaty chunks. At least that's what we think. Except he had a teleporter on him that in cases of extreme duress are supposed to teleport him like 10 feet away. Teleporter is completely ruined. The guy is like a charred husk of a man who will never ever do anything again. And we walk out of there and we're just like, man, that was a shame. We're walking out like, man, that's a shame that you had to disintegrate him in such a fashion. They're like, why? What were you going to do? And this is before any of them knew just how many guns I was carrying with me that are just a part of my body. And I remember like unfurling my robes, and there's like a grenade launcher, a flamethrower, a laser gun, a plasma gun. And then I have my big old meaty power axe. Essentially, think of like a lightsaber axe. And they're like, oh, well, crap. And then we all laugh and have a good laugh, even though my laugh is like ha ha ha. And we all go back to the party and schmooze some more. Actually, we don't even schmooze. We're just like, party was lame anyway. And then we just leave in the middle of the party. Later, those three characters are together, hanging out, being best buds because they were friends, and they're the only people that each other trusted. And they are part of a mission, an envoy mission to a group of Space Marines. If you don't know Space Marines, they're genetically and cybernetically enhanced humans and indoctrinated to be the greatest warriors that ever existed for all time and forever, and they're massive Mary Sues that actually can't do anything but fight, but when they fight, they're the most badass fighters, except they're not, because they get beat all the time. I have a thing against Space Marines. But they're envoys to some Space Marines that they're escorting to a mission. Just a small group. Because Space Marines are such badass warriors, and these guys, although these three characters are in their own right badass, they're not on par with Space Marines. So they did some favor for some of the Space Marines, and for the returning favor was that these Marines were going to come along and help take care of some stuff. The way I like to run games is I like to have essentially like a set piece or two. Actually, I like to have a set piece about every 2 or 3 sessions that is essentially a cutscene. And I have these Marines walking around this ship that they're on, just kind of checking things out. They pretty much always stick together because that's how they work. And they come across a viewport where they can see down into a training room. And they see these three characters. They see this massive machine man that's bigger than any of them. And Space Marines are like twice the size of a normal human. And then they see what looks to be just a normal guy who's a little old. And then they see this psyker who physically looks like a stiff breeze will knock him over. But for some reason, like, everybody on the ship kind of, like, reveres and also has no problems with, even though he's kind of a weird individual whose brain could turn into a portal for demons. And they're kind of squaring off with each other in kind of like a Mexican standoff triangle. And then, out of nowhere, you see the commissar pull out this shotgun and just, like, rail off, like, 6 shots. 3 at each. He splits them up perfectly. And the psyker you see just, like, take it to the chest and falls over. And then you see all the pellets just kind of, like, push out of his body, and he just stands up like Nosferatu. Meanwhile, the tech priest just kind of, like, bounces off of his body, because, of course, I mean, the man's made of metal. And then the commissar, like, ducks around behind a building and is, like, reloading that gun and, like, pulling out a couple other weapons and getting them prepared. Meanwhile, the psyker pulls out this massive plasma pistol that's, like, way overbuilt and really powerful. And he takes a few seconds to, like, line up his shot and then activates the laser sight because he forgot about it and turns that on. He's like, oh, and, like, readjusts his shot and takes a shot at Father Kane, who takes it to the chest and just, like, turns and looks. But Father Kane does not move quickly when it comes to, like, closing the distance in battle. So he unfurls his cloak, and there's the 4 guns that I talked about before. And then in the other hand, he has essentially an assault rifle, like a badass assault rifle. And then in his main hand, he has a minigun. And he starts launching grenades at the commissar who's behind cover. And then he just starts unloading with all of his guns on both of them, trying to get any damage to stick. But it doesn't happen. And so, after he, like, unloads everything that he has ammo-wise, he just, like, drops all these weapons. The arms furl back in. The psyker took pretty much every bullet that came his way, but because of his power set, like, a bullet enters him and exits, and then the hole just, like, reseals like nothing ever happened. I mean, his clothes are messed up, and they're pretty raggedy after taking minigun fire. And the commissar has been, like, running around dodging and, like, hoping to God that his armor that is his armored jacket holds up. And then Father Kane, his legs, like, slowly start to compress. Because I figured something out. Father Kane's speed was reduced dramatically because the way that system works is your speed is directly tied to your dexterity, and he didn't have high dexterity, and he had a botched surgery that reduced his dexterity even further. But his mechanical legs had incredibly high strength, and he had a lot of skill in athletics, which includes jumping, and that is a strength-based skill. So I figured out, okay, in a round I can move like 10 feet. Walking. Actually, that's like quick walking. I can move 10 feet in about 6 seconds. Or if I jump, which 6 seconds, same time period for a round, if I jump, I can go like 40 feet. So he compresses and just like Hulk jumps like right in between them. And they both take this opportunity to attack him in melee. Which, the reason Father Kane has a whole bunch of guns is because he's actually really not a good shot. Like, he's not bad, but he's not a good shot. Unlike the Commissar, who in a single round was able to rip off like 6 shots from a shotgun and hit both targets perfectly from like 50 feet away. Father Kane has to spray and pray, whereas the Commissar actually can hit things. And the Commissar, while all this is going on, is just taking shots at both of them. Just like, especially Father Kane, because he knows Father Kane's pretty much invulnerable. I mean, they're best friends. So he's just like unloading rounds into him from cover and while running and like all these things that would normally put massive penalties on somebody. Nope, not a big deal for him. But once he gets in the middle, both of the Psyker and the Commissar take the opportunity to tag team him in melee. Father Kane is actually really good at melee combat. Actually, all 3 of those characters were really good at melee combat. And they go at it. It's like a... It's like a Kessen match. Not Kessen. For some reason I was thinking Tekken, even though the game that I'm actually thinking of is Soul Calibur. It's like a Soul Calibur match, except none of the characters are actually hitting each other. They're just constantly parrying, except Father Kane is parrying 2 people simultaneously with a single weapon. And this goes on for a few moments before one of them, like... I can't remember who I had. I think I had the Commissar get, like, actually hit Father Kane, and Father Kane actually hit the Psyker. And then they stop their training session, and Father Kane, being at that point fairly high rank, has an assistant who just kind of like walks up behind the Space Marines. He's like, so, are you guys so confident that you can do this mission if he's not willing to undertake it himself? And they just kind of look at him like, what? Why are we here? Why aren't these 3 like ridiculous normal humans going into this situation? We saw a man unload like 60 shots with various small arms, shotguns, pistols, small rifles, and never miss. We saw another man who has so many guns that he puts an entire Space Marine team to shame. And then we saw a guy who can't die. So why are we going? What is so... Why? Later on, because I essentially came up with a mechanic for that game where, as the Space Marines were pushing through this space station, they could call in support of heavy gunner teams, which were teams of like 8 tech priests with two heavy guns, like emplaced guns, like 50 cal, like way bigger than 50 cal, but like 50 cal or things of that nature, to hold an area while they pushed forward, while the Marines pushed forward. And so I was like, hey, how would you Marines like to have essentially a sparring match? I mean, it's not often that we have Marines on our ship, and it's not often that we have any means of seeing how tough you guys really are. I mean, there's 6 of you. Or, no, 5. There's 5 of you, but I mean, clearly you should be able to take on a whole bunch of Skritari Tech Guard. They're essentially heavily machine-augmented soldiers that frequently use advanced but kind of odd weaponry, like electrified swords and like weirdo machine pistols and things of that nature. And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll do this. And I was like, great. The person leading the Tech Guard, because I'm Father Kane, of course it's going to be my assistant. He's going to be leading them in trying to assault you guys, and all you have to do is hold your position and please don't kill anyone. I know Space Marines can accidentally kill people with their spit, but please don't. And that is actually a thing. Space Marines have acidic spit. It was put into them through genetic pseudoscience so that they can help get themselves out of situations where they might be bound. Somehow, if you manage to bind a Space Marine in something that can actually hold their ungodly strength, they might be able to burn through it with their acid spit. And they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. This will be fun. And it's these first players. Essentially, I wanted the players to get an opportunity to test out their characters' combat capabilities. Because Space Marines are nothing if not combat machines. So we were like 4 sessions in and they hadn't had a fight yet. Sorry about that. It had all been just like political maneuvering and things of that nature. Negotiations. Which Space Marines are supposed to be adept at, but in any gaming system you can't make them adept at it because then they would have too many skill points, and if a player wanted to, then they can min-max their skill points for only combat situations, and it's just a game balance thing. So the players readily agree to have it to some action, and so do the Marines. That's kind of their deal. So they go in. It is a live fire scenario, but with the caveat of attempt to not kill. Father Kane, important note, Father Kane's assistant. So Father Kane, my character, started off as being like an actual tech priest. But due to some finagling and clearly where the campaign was going, he turned into a member of the Skritari, the Tech Guard. And then as the game kept going, he became a commander and then a Magos, which is one of the highest ranks that you can get in the Tech Priests. And he became a Magos militant, and then through other finaglings, he was given control of a small fleet of ships and his own contingent of troops. His assistant is a far more of an actual tech priest to assist him in areas that he is not an expertise in. But the guy is not combat incapable. He's just not a soldier first. He's an engineer and scientist first, a soldier third. Which is good. Very good. But he has what is a power fist, which is essentially a giant-ass glove surrounded by a power field A power field is essentially takes any normal weapon and gives it the ability to break any other weapon that does not have a power field, or any material that does not have a power field around it. It's essentially like taking a sword or a gauntlet or an axe or whatever and turning it into a lightsaber version of that. So his main weapon is he has this power fist. And he gets into through some finagling, he gets into a fight with one of these Space Marines that is the Space Marine's combat knife, which not powered, but incredibly deadly machinery, a piece of like weaponry. It's essentially a sword and a normal, like a claymore in a normal person's hands, but it's like a machete in their hands. That's how big Space Marines are. And in the game system, every character, when it's not their turn, has one reaction that they can perform when it's not their turn. And I use his reaction to parry that Space Marine's knife. Well, I roll for the parry. I successfully parry. I roll for the power field breakage chance, and it breaks. Now, Space Marine knives, they're not, aside from being, they're not, generally speaking, anything special in terms of their materials or anything like that, but they're kind of a badge of office, kind of like a ritualistic right in order to earn one of these things, one of these knives. You're usually given it after you successfully complete your first mission that takes you from being a scout, kind of an initiate, into being a fully fledged Space Marine. And this character just broke it, and he knows the importance of these things. He's not dumb, and he just stops and looks down and then looks up at the Space Marine, who then pummels him into... He almost kills him with his bare fists. He just flies into a rage and just starts smashing his head against like the ground. Like, that's how vicious this beating is. At which point Father Kane and his buddies come in and call an end to the little sparring session. And then the Commissar, the normal human who has, I don't think, a single augment. The only thing he's had done is he's had what's called rejuvenate treatment, which helps keep someone a bit younger than they might otherwise be. Keeps them a bit more spry, that way they can still perform in combat as they get older. This Commissar is just berating these Space Marines. So you have this like 5'7", like 190 pound, or probably 200 pound guy wearing probably an additional 200 pounds of gear on him, who's just like looking straight up into these Space Marines and just ripping them apart. It's difficult to explain, just like the funny imagery, but it at the time was wonderful. And essentially he berated them for like, you're supposed to be the best of the best, have everything under control, be the greatest soldiers, and look what you did. You lost your cool and you beat a man nearly to death during a sparring session. It was quite entertaining. At least it was for me at the time. And I wasn't the one actually doing the berating. So, my housemate Ryan, he is the character of the Commissar. And he was actually not in that game as a player. We were doing something that I had never done before, but I'd heard from a couple people who had done it before. We were co-DMing. We were both running this game. And the idea would be that for most situations, he would run the general operation of the campaign. and I would assist him by essentially running an NPC on this space station that is simultaneously helping and hindering the players. And if things got like bogged down, like I could share in descriptions and help keep some of the other players on task if it wasn't like their turn to do things. Because that is actually something that happens a lot. Is that when it's not your turn, a lot of people just kind of like shut off and aren't paying attention, which is looked down upon pretty heavily by everyone who's a GM. But it happens, especially if there's anything else to pay attention to, which is why me and housemate Roland came up with a bunch of like small rules for our gaming table. So if you're going to play at my gaming table, there's a few rules you have to follow. And one of the big rules is no electronics at the table. Yes, that means phones too. When game is going on, turn your phone off. Put your phone somewhere else. It cannot be at the table. Unless, like, exceptions can be made. Like, if your wife is expecting to give birth at any moment, yeah, you can have your phone with you. We're not monsters. But the idea is as few distractions as possible. Actually, we have a whole list of rules, and it's quite extensive. I'm a little bit more laxed in some areas. For instance, I allow electronics at the table if, and only if, it is like a tablet, or if you have a PDF of one of the game books that you need to have with you at all times. For instance, this is generally speaking, most are true with wizards or spell-using classes in a game, is that they pretty much need to have a book all to themselves. Because they're constantly looking stuff up. They always need to reference a spell or something. Always. Every spellcaster is always needing to look stuff up constantly. So if they can have a copy of the book on their phone or on their tablet or something like that, I will generally allow that at the table. But if I then catch them playing freaking Candy Crush on their phone or whatever, no, you don't get to have that anymore. You get one shot. Do not let your do not blow your chance. Mom spaghetti. I'm sorry. Actually, no, I'm not. That was a downright lie. So another thing, here's another story, and it has a kind of parable to go along with it, and that is players, when coming up with plans, will always attempt something that you have, if you're the DM, you have not thought of, and in your mind makes no sense at all. Perfect example. In the game of Shadowrun, which is kind of a cross between Cyberpunk, like Johnny Mnemonic, or Snow Crash, and kind of like Lord of the Rings. What if Cyberpunk met Lord of the Rings? That's pretty much what Shadowrun is. But magic in that game is really weird and a different system, at least in the 3rd edition of Shadowrun, which is what we mostly played. But I digress. We were given a job to steal a car that was in impound. So, my character, and I had made this character beforehand. Like, nobody, there's no way I could have predicted that this job was going to happen. My character happened to be a stunt artist in Hollywood or a stuntman in Hollywood who got kicked out or like lost jobs and no one would hire him because he was too strung out on drugs. So we get this job. To go steal cars from impound. To go steal this car from impound. And the other characters are like trying to come up with this elaborate scheme where they might have to kill a couple cops. Oh, Shadowrun, generally speaking, you're always playing a criminal, by the way. And they're just trying to come up with like the best way to do this without getting caught, and they're actually coming up with some pretty good ideas. Except while they're discussing this, I'm just like, guys, I can just go get it, and the players ignore me along with their characters, and I just look at the DM and I'll be like, hey, I'm just gonna go walk up to the gate. And he's like, okay. You walk up to the gate. I'm like, all right. I'm like, and I tell them exactly I tell them the kind of car I need. I don't give them an exact description of the car. I'm like, this is the kind of car I need. I'm hoping in like these colors. And they're like, okay, why do you need this? It's like, well, we're shooting a scene in town, and I make up this lie that makes total sense. And then they're like, okay, well, do you have ID with you? And I pull out my driver's license and my union card. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah. And they come and they take me up to this vehicle and they're like, yeah, will this work? I'm like, and I take a few pictures of it, and then I make a phone call. And I call one of the other characters. And the DM has to then like interrupt their conversation. He's like, hey, you get a phone call. They're like, what? And it's from Koki. That was my character's nickname. They're like, what? And they start looking around like, what the hell's Koki? And I'm like, hey, so yeah, I'm here at the impound, and I'm looking at this car. Here, I'll send you some pictures. Does this look good? Like, to keep up appearances. And they're like, oh, what is going on? And after a few moments, I'm like, okay. So here's what's gonna happen, guys. And I just talk to the security guards. I'm like, all right, so here's what's gonna happen. Of course, I'm not gonna pay you because I'm not gonna pay you out of pocket for this. But the studio is gonna send you guys a check. So let me get your information so I can make sure that they get the credit chip to the right people. And they hand me the keys to the car, and I drive it on out, and we go and deliver it. And then a couple days later, I place a call to those guys. I'm like, sorry guys, I know I said nothing was gonna happen, but we had a production accident, and I think what I say is, No. That was our plan, was to call in. But what actually happened was we turned the car in to the guy that wanted the car. And I immediately get on the phone and be like, oh my god, like I call the cops and report the car stolen. And I give them my ID and my union card, and then I call the impound and be like, oh my god, guys, you have no... I was just carjacked. And it... That was a great moment. That was one of those moments where sometimes players, like, even other players, like, will think of something that is, like, overly complex and makes no goddamn sense, and they're ignoring someone at the table who has a perfectly reasonable way of doing something without, like, making it horribly complex or, like, endangering anybody, or... And yeah, so, like, my character was able to complete a job without, like, our crew in Shadowrun was called the Wrecking Crew. And there's a good reason for that. Things, did not typically go well for our crew. We had lost like 3 safe houses. We had all almost died at least once. The Wrecking Crew was not a group of people you really wanted to be around. But they always got the job done. They frequently left a trail of corpses a mile long. But they always got the job done. But, like, I was able to... We completed a job without leaving a trail of bodies. I'm pretty sure that was the first time that crew had ever done that. And it was because, by happenstance, my character happened to have the correct credentials. I didn't have the skills. I wasn't an actor. I wasn't, like, the face of the team. It wasn't my job to, like, be the smooth talker. I just happened to have the credentials that I could walk up and be like, hey, yeah, we're going to pay you a bunch of money for this car. Thanks. Trying to remember why we needed the car. I want to say we needed that car for something, and we had found somebody that happened to own one, and he's like, yeah, man, no, but it got impounded. But I also need that car back because it's got a bunch of drugs hidden in the trunk, and if they find that, then I'm going away for life. As opposed to just, like, I want to say, like, larceny or something like that. So we stole the car, we got him his drugs back, I took some, and he got all of his drugs, and then, which allowed him to stay alive, because I think that guy needed them to, like, the car got impounded and he was supposed to be a delivery boy from the supplier to the dealer. So he got to live. He didn't go to jail for the rest of his life. And we got to then take the car to somebody that really wanted the car. That really wanted that make, model, and color. It was essentially, the job was gone in 60 seconds, and that car was supposed to be, like, if you've ever seen the movie, Nicolas Cage is in love with a Shelby Cobra, and this car was going to be our Shelby Cobra. Like, yeah, we're going to get it, but it's going to get all sorts of messed up because we're going to have to do a bunch of sketchy stuff in it. But I happen to have the right credentials to just bypass all the sketchy stuff and just make it happen. Which is good, because I had screwed up a whole bunch earlier in that campaign with, you know, being a drug addict and being unpredictable while on drugs. They eventually put me through forced detox. Otherwise, they were going to kill me. So that helped a lot. But then that character wanted to die because for some reason he kept on... God damn. I spent... So every time we would complete a job, we would get a pretty big paycheck. Nice, right? Criminals completing jobs, getting their pay. I, at the end of every mission, would have to spend pretty much all of my money to be in the hospital. And it got to the point where the hospital kept a room open for me. Because they knew in like a couple days, Koki's gonna be back in with another, like, horrible gunshot wound to the leg or to the chest or a concussion or whatever. Yeah, when a hospital... Like, it's always weird when you're a regular... At least I always find it weird when you're a regular of a place. Like, if you walk into a restaurant and they know they know your order. I always find that kind of weird. But if a hospital is keeping a bed, like, set aside just for you because they know you're coming in, that's probably a bad sign. Unfortunately, that campaign ended before it might otherwise would have, because the person that ran it, he likes to run, like, really, like, nitty-gritty campaigns. Unfortunately, when you've been playing in a super nitty-gritty, like, I can taste the dirt gritty campaign for a length of time, it doesn't ever feel like anything you do makes any goddamn progress in your life, and so you kind of lose interest in playing that game. And although we did not sabotage that game like we did the 40K game we were in, it definitely died due to lack of interest. Which is a shame, because it was actually a lot of fun whenever we were playing it. It's just that, like, in between sessions, we would be like, God, we gotta play Shadowrun this week. What's he gonna do to screw us over this time? Like, that was our mindset. And that's never the mindset, A, that you want to be in as a player, and that's never the mindset you want to instill into your players as the DM. But we just, no matter what we did, we would go 2 steps forward and 12 steps back. So I, on the other hand, run a game where I want my players to feel like they're succeeding and doing awesome stuff. That's primarily what I want my players to think they're doing. I want my players to think they're doing awesome stuff. Sometimes they are doing awesome stuff. And sometimes, at least to me, what they're doing is incredibly, like, tedious, but to them is so, like, the life's blood of their character. And you know what? If that is what gets them through the campaign, thinking about, like, oh yeah, man, so I've got, like, my army of spies hidden throughout the city, and they're funneling information to me, and even though most of the information doesn't matter, just the fact that that character got to set that up. Like, that was their whole plan for their character, was to set up this, like, information network that they were on top of. You know what? Sometimes you just have to give in to your players a little bit. And that's essentially the way I like to run my games. Is like, hey, did you make a character who's supposed to be like a super awesome badass warrior? We'll make that happen. Did you make a character that's like clearly wanting to be like what the hell happened here? Well, we're almost done. Okay, so we are missing something from Medina Al Afiel. I guarantee you I pronounced that wrong. Okay, thank you. Population, so we're after rumors and lore. Come on. Copy for me. Okay, and then lives among... And now... lives among the wild islands of the... crowded sea. Okay, there we go. Wait. Did I do the same city twice? No? Did I just add that? Yes, I did. That does not go there. And I'm missing more. This goes here. So then I need to go back up here. To just above. Let's see here. God dang it. Does not go looking for it. Copying and pasting. Alright, so where does this go? I'm sure that has occurred several more times. Fragile balance between them. Okay. Yeah, because this city's section split between... Where was the... Is overrun with its heritage. Five-sided tower and the rooms. There we are. Right in here. I wonder how many other places that's occurred. God. Oh well. I mean, this right here is all supposed to be under this. One of my favorite places, by the way, in the world of Akadem is going to Ragasoto. Or, sorry, Ragasto. The reason is because you get jungle, you get sea, because it's a port city, and there's just a bunch of awesome stuff nearby it. A bunch of, like, ruins and whatnot. So there's a lot of room for adventure. In fact, one of my last campaigns that I've run was set pretty heavily in Ragosto. I had a race that, technically speaking, does not exist in Al-Qadim make an appearance and kind of mess things up. And that race is the Drow, the Dark Elves of the D&D world. They appear everywhere in every realm where there's an Underdark. They appear, except in Al-Qadim. And the reason is because they used to show up in Al-Qadim, even in the Overdark and Underdark, except for a long time ago, there was a battle between the people of the surface world and the people of the underworld of the Underdark, and they killed all the Drow that were in any cities or anything near Al-Qadim. And the towers of Ragosto have inscriptions featuring information about that very self-said subject. Except I had the Drows make an appearance because the Drows are also a matriarchal society, like heavily so. And there is a god amongst Drow that is a male god that is like the god of like rebellion. And so essentially what I had these Drow doing is they had taken a Drow child and had groomed him to become the avatar of this god so that they could become free from the matriarchal society and live as they see fit. They were going to sacrifice this child to their god so that he would become an avatar and help bring a new era for them. Except the avatar's vessel got stolen, and because it was a powerful vessel, it was made to house the power of a god, or not made, but groomed to house the power of a god. And so it was stolen. It was going to be sacrificed to a demon so that a priest who was a priest of madness and believed in the multiverse, even though he had never. Land of Fate is the kind of moniker for Al-Qadim. So it is the campaign setting is Al-Qadim, the Land of Fate. Even though the continent that it takes place on is called Zakara. And Fate has a big important thing with Al-Qadim, and that Fate is a godlike being that the characters or that people pray to and curse. And sometimes she shines her favor on you, and sometimes she doesn't. And sometimes if you curse her enough or you tempt her enough, sometimes she'll screw you over for no other reason than she can. But she doesn't have like a full like religious teachings or anything like that. It's just an embodiment of what the people believe. And this is the only world, or this is the only part of the world in all of D&D that she exists. You will not find Fate showing up even in other areas of the Forgotten Realms. It is just here. So it is her land. So D&D has many things going on in it. One is it has a multiverse. There are, I think, 8 or 9 different realms or worlds that I can think of. And then there's, or planes, there's 1, 2, 3, there's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I think there's 18 planes of existence. And then there's a couple of things that don't exist as planes, even though you can go to them. And then there's different worlds in the main plane called the Primaterium plane. That's where all like the Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance or Dark Sun. That's where all those worlds are, is in the Primaterium plane. But Forgotten Realms, in and of itself, has 1, 2, 3, 4 main continents where things have taken place. There is Faerun, which is where pretty much anything takes place. If you've read any book by R.A. Salvatore, featuring the character Dritz Do'Urden, those all take place in the Forgotten Realms of Faerun. Then there is Zakara, the Land of Fate, which is very Arabian themed, as opposed to like generic European Middle Ages. And then there's Kuratao, I believe is how it's pronounced, which is Asiatic, like East Asian, Japan, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese feeling. Mostly Chinese, Japanese. And then there is a world that got, or a continent that got very, very little attention called Mazdaca. And Mazdaca is Mesoamerican. So think like Incan or Mayan, Aztec. Like that's what that is kind of themed after. And it had only one product, I think, ever put out for it. And it didn't sell very well. But ever since 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons it happened, they've pretty much spent all their time focused around just Faerun, the generic Forgotten Realms, which has a lot going on in it, and just about anything you want to do can happen in the Forgotten Realms. Like, there is a small desert there. There's a swamp. There's mainly tundra and like woodlands, but there's other stuff there as well. It's most famous for having the Underdark make its big first appearance there, and Undermountain is there. They're Oh yeah, here's the rumor that I was talking about. Ragosto's great mystery is its towers. It is assumed that they were created by some magical, possibly divine race from the heavens. A few surviving inscriptions from the race are in an archaic tongue, seen nowhere else in the Land of Fate. They speak of a war, say the sages, between the city's dwellers and those above. The natives evidently lost and abandoned their city. The nature of those original inhabitants is unknown, except that they were humanoid. All humanoid races have been suggested, but common thinking leans towards burned elves, dark elves, or the drow, which don't exist because they were all driven away and all of their idols and temples were smashed. So they also don't like the sun in general, but that the portion of the world where that city takes place in is largely surrounded by jungle, so there's a lot more shadow. Well, so that was awfully convenient timing for this. We finished up our initial pass through of editing, and it happens to be 9 o'clock. So I would like to thank each and every one of you for coming and hanging out with me. I especially want to give thanks to Kassan, Wicked, and Trainboy for participating in tonight's chat. Tomorrow, we will be going back to Morrowind, where we will be continuing to look for a bow in a cave full of super awesome loot, very little of which we can carry out. And then on Saturday, starting at noon and going to 3 p.m. Pacific time, I will be doing a makeup stream for the fact that I wasn't here on Tuesday because of a work issue, where we will be doing our community day of Killing Floor 2. So if anybody wants to join me for that, please load up Killing Floor 2 and be here on Saturday. Anyways, hope you guys have a wonderful night, and I hope to see you tomorrow.